Welcome to The Turnaround Artists, a podcast about turning things around when they don't go our way. I'm your host, Brian McFarland. I'll bring on interesting guests to share stories of impressive turnarounds from the worlds of business, entertainment, health, and wellness. You'll also hear plenty of personal turnaround stories, including some of my own, from my wilder days at Rolling Stone to my current state of peaceful sobriety. Tune in each week for ideas and inspiration for your own life. Please note, the views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect those of your host or the Turnaround Artists episodes. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian McFarland, and we are here at the Turnaround Artists, episode 1. It's Showtime with Stu Zakim. So I'm your host, and we want to thank our listeners for joining. The reason that we're going to kick off with Stu for our premiere episode is he is a very, very, very successful PR professional in the media and entertainment world. He's spearheaded more turnarounds than I can possibly tell you, but we're going to focus on one here in media entertainment. And the topic we're going to talk about today is his turnaround of Showtime. So in doing just a little fact checking before our discussion today, I discovered that it was 1983 that Viacom and Warner merged their premium channels into what was then Showtime and the movie channel. And Stu and I, having a history and passion for music, I found it very interesting that their first program that they launched was a concert with none only than Rod Stewart, Pink Floyd, and ABBA. I can imagine what the backstage was like over there. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Stu. Thank you for coming. And to get right into it, take the mic and tell us how you ended up at Showtime and what state was in when you arrived.
Sure. Well, first of all, Brian, thanks for having me on your premiere episode. I think this is a really great idea, what you're doing, because turnarounds happen in every industry, and it's really the key to success, right? If you stay stagnant, the world will pass you by. Constantly adapting is what we all do. You as a salesperson, me as a PR person, and I think anybody who is successful in the world has to do that constantly. That said, so it all started. I went to Boston University's College of Communication, received a degree in public relations at a time when that was not really the norm. In fact, it was only BU and Syracuse that offered a bachelor's degree in public relations at that time. And Boston won hands down over Syracuse because. And I had a great education, very hands-on, not so much book learning. There are certain areas that are book learning driven, but most of this is guts, inner instinct, and understanding people. So, which is not really easy to teach. It's a natural inclination, I believe, just to understand how to communicate and deal with people, and how to, I don't want to use the word manipulate, how to convince them or perhaps change how they approach and think of things. And that's what salespeople do. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a salesperson. So
I'll interject for a second and say manipulate, near and dear to my heart, because my favorite book in the world is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. So every time people say you're a salesperson, then you manipulate people, I say, no. I influence them to make a choice that they might have come to their own conclusion, but I'm just going to help accelerate them to get there, and it's going to have a positive outcome for us both.
Okay, that's a very good spin. See, Ryan, you've learned a lot over the years. So I started when I graduated college at Columbia Pictures in the publicity department as an assistant. It was great, very lucky to have gotten into that industry. I couldn't have done it today with the way things work now, but then it was a much different world. I rose through the ranks, and after 8.5 years, had peaked, did not want to move to Los Angeles, although I had the opportunity. Wanted to stay here where my family was, so I opted to go to another movie studio, which was started by producer Dino De Laurentiis, and it was based in Wilmington, North Carolina. I was basically overseeing that because that's where production happened. It was a right to work state, which means no union. It was very much old school movie making where you use the same crew for each of the movies as they were in production. It was great, but it was relatively short-lived because it in today's world didn't have enough revenue streams beyond box office. So I had received a call from a person near and dear to us, Jan Wenner, who invited me to come to work for him at Rolling Stone as they were experiencing their 20th anniversary, which was a dream come true on a lot of levels, to work at a publication that I had read religiously as a kid because I was always a rock and roll fan, and to work at the side of a person who really changed journalism for an entire generation. It gave me access to things I would have never had before, people I would have never met, and just an experience as a whole of being a part of something that really does change the world.
For sure.
And even though we're talking Showtime, there was a bit of a turnaround at the parent company of Rolling Stone at the time, and transitioning from tabloid print to slick glossy. And that's how they made all their money once they did that.
Sure. Share with our listeners. Sorry to interrupt you, but I can
Yeah.
share with our listeners the most wonderful time of my career was getting that call from Rolling Stone as well. Favorite magazine on the planet, favorite content on the planet. And I remember after a pretty vigorous interviewing process, most people don't realize that we had to wear suits and ties to work every day because Jan did, so we did. I remember making countless sales calls, and you'd walk in, everybody thinks you're the cool Rolling Stone guy, and you show up in a suit and tie, and they're like, what? And you're like, our boss wears them, so I have to wear them. But I worked there for a total of 8 years. That's when we met, one of the great acquaintances and friends of my life. And it really was a dream come true. As crazy as it was to work there, it was
Correct.
a dream come true. So,
And that will be a separate call we can do. But I went back to the film business at Universal Pictures, and I ended up there for 9 years, ran the New York office, which I was a corporate officer, so that meant I was corporation. So I had a lot of different responsibility. I went to a couple of .coms because I had to. I would have killed myself had I not tried. And then the bubble burst. And lo and behold, I went back to work for Jan Wenner, which was a nice homecoming. It was concerning initially Us Weekly.
Correctly. There was one funny anecdote. It was either the second or third time you came in. I'll never forget the story you told me because, Jan fires and hires people at will, not for any particular reason. And I do remember you saying when he brought you back, you were sitting in his office, and you can provide extra color on this and not. And you said it was one of the things that had bugged you because you didn't know why you got terminated one time. And you said, Jan, you're offering me a job. Can you just explain to me why you let me go the first time? And if I remember correctly, he said, I'm not sure.
He goes, why don't you tell me? And I told him what I had thought, and he goes, yeah, that sounds right.
And there was also so many stories of him. I don't know, this isn't about Jan, technically, but I remember many stories of him firing editors. He didn't know why, and then he would come to work the next day, and he's like, "Where's John Smith?" And he's like, "You fired him last night." And he's like, "For what?" And I don't know. It's like, we'll call him back and tell him he has his job back. It's just like, wow, yes. That's the type of place it was to work. Well, I digress, Stu, because we are here to talk about Showtime.
And around that time, as I mentioned, HBO was their premier competition. HBO's run on programming, which was unparalleled, was coming to an end. So their era of The Sopranos, Sex and the City, tons of other programs that won awards and are legends in the industry were over. So Showtime, needed a major turnaround because their moment was there. This was it. They had programming lined up that was on par, if not better, than a lot of the stuff that were hits on HBO, with brand name talent. And the strategy was, once the flow was there, I would use that success to target stories about how Showtime was turning itself around. And that was really key because I was dealing with a lot of different constituencies that we were looking to influence. Certainly the Showtime management wanted to influence CBS with the success of what they were doing, of their strategy, how it was working effectively, and what that all meant. And then, of course, the cable operators, who are really the major gatekeeper in the world of premium television, because if they don't carry you, you don't get an audience. And even with streaming now, it's still the same way. Those cable distributors are, even though they stream their stuff, it goes through their site. You have to be a subscriber. So you're actually, people are paying to watch your content. And so generate at that, within a year or two, Showtime actually was the primary revenue driver for CBS Corporation, which I know I played a hand in. I wasn't the person creating the programming. I don't want to misrepresent that at all. I was just using its success as a mechanism to get positive stories about the network. Because not only were we looking to influence our partners at CBS and the cable distributors, the creatives we wanted to reach out to. So we weren't getting second choice. We would be the primary choice. So if they had a great show like Weeds or a great show like The Tudors or Dexter, they came first to Showtime. And that started to happen. So the nature of the coverage, has how the network was referred to, changed. It became not a poor man's HBO. It became a player.
Yeah.
And that was personified probably in the best way by winning its first Emmy. Showtime had been in business 45 years or whatever, never won an Emmy. So by winning its first Emmy award, helped solidify its position not only on the business side, but on the creative side.
Yeah.
And that was really important to that. And there's a credible, I wish I had the graphic of it or had looked it up online before we had this call, but multi-channel news, which is, or was, unfortunately, because it doesn't exist anymore, the Bible for the cable industry. I had got them to do a cover story on the turnaround at Showtime, and the cover illustration was in the car. So it was a car driving over a hill, because we were coming over the hill to be successful, was, Michael C. Hall, Mary Louise Parker, Jonathan, the guy from The Tudors, and other stars were in the driver's seat, and behind it, chasing them, were the HBO characters. And that was worth $1 million in many, many ways, and started really taking, as I said, taking the network from being perceived as, a poor man in HBO to a real player. And its chairman and its head of programming were starting to get industry awards, which was also under my purview as well.
Sure.
And which helped professionalize and also solidify. Even though the company had been around for all that time, they were never taken seriously. And now the industry was showing its recognition to that.
Well, I can tell you, Stu, firsthand, I hope you got a cut of me adding Showtime into my package, because the way, better than me, but the way it was working, at least my experience was, right? So I had regular broadcast TV, then I got cable. Showtime was like, it either came free or it was like $1 or something like that. I really couldn't afford HBO because I think it was in like a $19.95 a month add-on. So that's a lot, as you can appreciate, as a struggling seller in the space. And where I felt lost as a salesperson, right, I'd be around the water cooler at Rolling Stone, and everyone's talking about it in the day, Tony Soprano and this and that, and I got nothing to say, right? So that's weird, because then you go out to a lunch with all these younger clients, and that's the topic of discussion. I'm completely lost. But I did during that time. I still couldn't afford. Let me start watching these Showtime shows. I really started watching it, and then you pull the bait and switch, and Showtime's $9.99 a month, right out of the gate as it starts to get popular. I don't know if you get on a commission basis, but you converted a lot of us.
But I would get it perhaps somehow reflected in my bonus, because that increased, if you're increasing your revenue, increases people's bonuses, especially if you had a hand in it. So, and probably one of the biggest compliments for me personally, was I got the year after I got to Showtime. And as I mentioned, I did not know anything about premium television or how it worked and all that different stuff. I was named to Cablefax magazine's top 100 in cable issue.
In just a couple of years. It's impressive.
In 2 years, yes. Which was, I remember when I got the call, and I called my boss and I said, guess what? He goes, you never, I was named to the cable list. He goes, no way. He goes, you're not higher than Matt, are you? Matt being the chairman of the company and who had a very sensitive ego. And I said, I can't imagine I'm higher than he is. He goes, well, maybe we shouldn't tell him that you made the list. And I said, no. I mean, that he'll find out about it. I mean, we might as well be the ones to. Anyway, it was quite funny. Yeah, as long as you're not higher than him, well, it was fine. So
No,
that was a pretty a
that
cool thing.
sure.
And I mean, there's another story I'll tell you about in a second, but that because these two represent probably the epics of the stories I generated while I was there. So Forbes was doing a piece on Showtime success as well, and when that kind of media outlet recognizes that you're doing a good job, it's a totally different ball game, right? You're not speaking to the converted. You're reaching an audience who probably has never seen a Showtime show, but also is the financial world, the people who make the world go round. So it was very, very flattering to the CEO of the company and how he had orchestrated this turnaround and how the parent company, because we were under the CBS archive, was enjoying the results of our revenue growth. But what they did, and once again, as I mentioned, the reporters don't write the headlines. It's usually another editor who writes the headline. In those days, publications had the luxury of fact checkers, which are people who actually check the facts
No,
to
no,
make
no.
sure
Wait,
that they're
really?
pub.
There's people who check facts in this day and
Well,
age.
there used to be. They would call and say, "Look, can we go over the story with you to make sure that everything is accurate?" Which, of course, gives me, as a PR pro, early look at what that story is going to be. So as they're asking me certain questions, I'm like, this sounds pretty good. And I said, can you just, what's the name of the story? So when I look it up online tomorrow, I can find it. And Showtime is the jewel of CBS's tarnished crown. I'm like, just take a knife and slit my throat, please. Because regardless of how positive it was for Showtime, which it was not well received story over at Black Rock, which is where CBS's offices were. And so I remember calling the CEO and saying, so I just did the fact checking and the story's going to turn out real good except for one thing. And he goes, what's that? I said, well, here's what the title is. He starts laughing hysterically. He goes, oh my God, they're going to have such a shit over there. And I said, well, don't you think I should call them and give them a heads up? He goes, no, let's enjoy the weekend.
That's now. So let's go to this whiteboard for a second, right?
Yeah.
So you're on the call with your boss. You know what's coming, and you say, "I'm guessing if we tell them, that's one path. If we
Yeah.
don't tell them, that's another path." There's no way you're going to squash this story, right? It doesn't matter.
No
Okay.
way.
No one has the
No
power.
man.
So it's coming. So when you roll the dice, I'm curious, what was your vote? Call them or not?
My vote was to call him
Was to call them. Okay. And
because I believe
what would have happened if you called them?
I would have got yelled at a day earlier. But or the person at CBS might have tried to get that story squashed or the headline softened, which I actually had done. I did get it softened because it was initially a little harsher.
Okay. So
Um,
you were overridden by your boss who said, don't call.
right.
And
And that's his job. I mean, he's the boss.
okay.
And he
And
goes, let them find out tomorrow. And, I said, look, they're going to know I knew. I mean, let's be real. How do we explain that we didn't give them a heads up? Because to me, it softens the blow. They may still be angry, but they're not being surprised by getting a call at 6 in the morning from one of their friends who happened to get it early on his desk when they came in, and they didn't know about it beforehand.
right. Now,
Because, like with
is that's a really, really, really interesting scenario because For your own self personally, question for you: Are you fireable over this offense at this point? Because CBS.
Well, let's say, I mean, CBS could have said to the Showtime CEO, fire him, and he would have had no choice but to do that. But they would have been silly to do that because the essence of the story was I had done my job excellently. It was hit all the right buttons. It had great photos of the CEO actually at the, whatever we were showcasing at the time. I forget what it was. And tons of quotes from him, all the stuff that I knew was important to him. Now, of course, CBS at the time was run by Les Moonves, who was a very powerful man and also very egotistical about media and who was in the media and who wasn't. And didn't really appreciate when we did some of these things because it took, whereas he should have been confident enough to know that it made him look good in his mind and made him look weak.
So story runs. Walk me through what time, who calls who, and what.
So
we're trying to be PG rated, so I don't want to hear all exactly what was said to you.
The head of CBS Corpcom doesn't call me first. He calls the CEO, my boss, and starts screaming at him. And then I get a call. You get up there right away to his office. So we're on the speakerphone. He's screaming, he's swearing at us. God, it was really not a pleasant call, but one that was not unexpected. And when it came time to why didn't you give us a heads up? I said, well, I did. On Friday, Gil, I had called you and said, they had started the fact check and the story sounded pretty good. Now, the fact checker's not going to read me the headline because they don't see the headline. They just have the text of the story. And I told you that it looked like it was going to be a good piece. Which was true.
Which is true, but your nose is growing right now, Stu.
This is that I'm tap dancing as fast as I can, right? I'm saying, but it's not like I didn't give you a heads up.
Right. You're just leaving out the
possibly.
Part you knew the headline, though.
Of course. But anyway, yeah. So that kind of encapsulates, in a way, how my function operates in the corporate world. I'm not in the corporate world anymore. I'm an independent agency owner now who represents clients, doesn't work for them per se as an in-house person. And that's a uniquely different relationship. Because as you know, the in-house person and the consultant can say the exact same thing. When the in-house person says it, when the consultant says it, what a great idea. So I love being on that side of, wow, what a great idea, as opposed to, So, and because they're paying you separately as a consultant, you have a different relationship, I think, with the client than you would as, I was unique in how I operated with my bosses because I really was a central part of their executive team. I mean, how many times did you see me, with Jan and all the brass, and same in most of the companies, because my role has to have a seat at the table to be effective.
For sure.
In the world that we live in today, with a 24/7 news cycle, everything that gets done, even the most innocuous social media post, can become a crisis, can become get out of control.
For sure.
So it's really important that companies, whether it's their in-house and their outside counsel, are given a seat at the table and weigh in on things that have absolutely nothing, you would think, to do with this. But once again, because of social media and everybody with a account can make noise, it becomes a much more vital function than it has in the past, I think.
Yes. And you've always impressed me, Stu, and you've always helped me, because there are many wonderful things I would say about you. But one thing is, you are never afraid to say what is on your mind.
That is true. And sometimes I don't deliver that message in an appropriate way, which historically has gotten me into hot water every now and then. But, that's my passion that comes through. I think there's a stereotype there of a PR guy as a yes man, and hey, let me get you a drink, pal, or stuff like that. When in reality, it's much more strategic than that, and I have to be able to speak frankly, indirectly. Otherwise, I'm actually not doing the job they're paying me to do. Now, if it's a sycophant situation, odds are I won't survive. I am just not a yes person, and I won't allow my name to be tarnished at the expense of anyone because I'm my own client,
Right. And
and my reputation is what makes me successful. So if I was known to just lie on behalf of my clients, I would never get an email or a phone call if I had made it received. I would not have the ability to influence a reporter and help spin them. I would never have any of that stuff because they would think I was full of shit, which is the last thing any of us want. So to your point, yeah, I am not afraid to speak my and accept that if there's negative consequences, so what?
yep, yep,
I can look myself in the mirror, which is an important part.
yeah.
So
Is what are the takeaways? I learned from a great story writer recently on TED Talks, a guy who wrote Finding Nemo and a lot of those shows, that it was about make me care. So, what I want our listeners to make them care is taking your story and understanding how they can be their own turnaround artist and what they're doing.
well, I think it really boils down to, first of all, your confidence in yourself. You have to have confidence. You have to be very knowledgeable about whatever it is you're involved in. And more importantly, understand how to grow the business and how what you're doing can help grow the business. Because I don't care what level job you have, ultimately, our job is one thing, and that's to make the boss look good. So if you're going to be successful, and once again, whatever area you're in, it's am what I am doing making the boss look good? And if it is, that's the security you get. Certainly in my line of business, if the boss doesn't look good, who gets the hit? It's me. And there are some PR pros who stay in their jobs forever, not necessarily rocking the boat, going, just maintaining status quo. I've never been one of those people. And, as a result, I do have this resume I do of all these great jobs. But in essence, once I've accomplished what I think I've accomplished, it kind of comes time to move on anyway.
Yeah. And I'll thank you, Stu, as we get to the close of our time. The turnaround, everything you just said. But one thing I'll note is your ability to reach across the aisle, right? Not different than what happens in the Senate and the House, right? My entire career, I've been in media sales for 10 years, and I had never spoken to a PR person in my life, ever. And you came
Hmm.
into, we were at Rolling Stone the same time. And I remember, I forget the exact time that we met, but I remember I had a deal going of X size, and you somehow wound up sitting with me and said, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? We could do this. We could add it to this. And in the end, it became 1 + 1 = 15. And because there was just like these factors, and I remember taking you on sales calls, which
Yeah,
was which was huge because nobody wants to listen to the seller. They don't care.
right.
But bringing in a big time PR guy who had some really great thoughts, and we're talking to media people, but then we wound up talking to bigger deal people, and you were just like, well, Brian and you were selling advertising pages here and working with that. Have you thought of XYZ? And you helped me so many times think of different ways to package things up. So you're always reaching across the aisle. You're always talking to salespeople like you did at Showtime, and you're embracing us, and you give us reason to go out into the market and have new tools to sell with. And for that, I'll always be thankful. And every role I've ever had since then, I meet the PR person immediately, or I meet the editors
Yeah,
immediately, and
yeah.
just say, how can we work together to help bring this product to life? So that's really one of your really fine
Well, thank
qualities.
you. I appreciate that. You're right. It's not normal. It's just who I am, how I operate. Our friend Mr. Winter would say to me, "What are you doing working with the sales department?" And I said, "Because I'm going to help you sell more ads."
Mm-hmm. So, well, I want to say a couple of thank yous. First off, I think of you so often because as I was going through my Sirius XM channels, I came across Jenny Alescu, who still
Yeah,
works there. That is
I know.
entirely thanks to you. You and I helped launch Sirius and
Yeah,
XM. You
yeah,
got her and Joe Levy hired over there, and she's still,
yeah.
I'm guessing that's her full-time job. You've helped me generate much more sales revenue in my career, both at Rolling Stone and in all my subsequent jobs. So I'm so thankful for that. I was fortunate enough to get such a big time guy at my first show, which I'm thankful for. And to our listeners, before we sign off, you're going to tune in soon because Stu and I are going to do several more segments. I'll tease them out. I know we're going to get a little bit deeper into Rolling Stone. I was actually going through pictures of the probably 125 celebrities I met because of you. One, me hanging out with Tommy Lee, and which was wild. Got to meet Clive Davis, may he rest in peace, and learn how to write a song. And Ozzy Osbourne, Kid Rock, names are ridiculous. So that was really fantastic. And you really just helped me and so many others. And then one of the exciting ones we started riffing on a little bit is going to be sort of having a nice, spirited, controversial, if you will, conversation about cannabis and your journey and my journey and how they used to intersect and now they're kind of a little bit on the opposite side, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to that too. So thank you so very much. I really appreciate your
My
time
pleasure.
being here. Thank you for listening to The Turnaround Artists. We hope you got some helpful insights into how to make a tough situation better. If you have a turnaround story you'd like to share with us, send an email to hello@theturnaroundartist.org. Tune in next week and be sure to follow and like us on your favorite podcast platform. In the meantime, keep turning things around.